UFC Fight Night, Cannonier versus Gastelum, aka UFC Vegas 34. Welcome to another UFC prediction and analysis video by yours truly here at Boxingmmapicks. He goes by the name of Zan, I go by the name of Harris, and as usual, we are giving you our fight-by-fight breakdown, fight-by-fight analysis specifically from the betting perspective. Here to let you know which fights are worth the value, which fights you want to stay away from, which underdog you perhaps want to take a shot at. And if you stick around to the end of the video, you may even get a little bit of parlay action as well. Of course, this is our UFC Vegas 34 main card prediction video, meaning that our prelim card prediction video has already come out. If you have not checked that out yet, press pause, go ahead and check that one out, and then return to this main card video. And definitely subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel here at Boxing MMA Picks. Participate in the comments, hit the notification bell, hit the thumbs up. Those are things that we would definitely appreciate. But of course, we got analysis to do. We got work to do. UFC Fight Night, Jared Cannonier, Kelvin Gastelum. There's 11 fights on this card. We covered the first 6 already from the prelim. So let's move on to the 5 that are on the main card, starting with fight number 1, and a pretty good one at that in the flyweight division. We have Alexandre Pantoja taking on Brandon Royval. And if I'm starting with this fight, looking at Alexandre Pantoja, he beat Manel Kape. That was in his last fight back in February. Kickboxing, almost a Thai type of stand-up, I should say. Marches his opponents down pretty often. Marches forward, a bit flat-footed, but again, that plays into that Thai type of style. He does throw one strike at a time at times, but pretty good striking diversity between punches and kicks. Definitely throws a lot into his strikes as well. And again, like I said, he likes to come forward. He's good at controlling the center. It's sort of a constant pace that comes out of him. And he's a pretty good overall fighter. I mean, going to look for grappling opportunities, body lock opportunities right away. Pretty aggressive off of his back and a lot of different submission attempts as well. Obviously, he's Brazilian to that effect, so he's going to have that grappling to his name. Like I said, good overall fighter, Alexandre Pantoja. This is a high-level fight in general because Brandon Royval is also a pretty good overall fighter. We know that he lost to Brandon Moreno back in November 2020. He suffered a shoulder injury in that fight, but Moreno was winning the fight, and obviously Moreno is now the champion, so can't be too mad at that. Like I said, with Royval, pretty dynamic striker. He's a southpaw on the feet. He can switch stance as well. Very dynamic combinations, good kicks, good hands, good movement, good consistent high level of activity coming out of him as well. And again, with his grappling, he's active on his back. He has submission attempts. He has Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He has good submission defense too. So he won't necessarily quit or tap too early. Again, high level fight, right? There's some questions that we want to think about with this. Can Pantoja do some of the things that Brandon Moreno was doing against Royval in round 1? And at that point, I think about the takedowns that Moreno was able to land. I think about the top game that Moreno was able to possess. Despite how good Royval is off of his back, Moreno was able to score points with his grappling ability on top. I look at this fight sort of similar to how Brandon Royval versus Casey Kenny went. That was back in 2018 in LFA. And again, sometimes I draw these fight comparisons, especially when I see some similarities. I can see Royval being the more dynamic striker. And usually that dynamic striker is my pick. But I feel like Pantoja's sturdier style on the feet is going to allow him to sort of pick his spots, find his punches. I do think Royval is hittable at times. And of course, we know Pantoja has that pop. And again, I think Pantoja has a good top game and a good grapple game in sort of the way that Casey Kenny was able to use in that Brandon Royval fight again back in their LFA days. So this is a very close fight. I mean, Royval, if I remember correctly, I think I had Royval to beat Brandon Moreno at the time. So that's how highly that I think of Brandon Royval for this flyweight division. But this is just a matchup where I think I'm leaning a little bit more on the side of Alexandre Pantoja. I'm definitely not going to bet on this. I'm just going to enjoy a high level fight. But if I do have to make a pick, Alexandre Pantoja is going to be that.
Yeah, I'm going with I'm going Pantoja as well. I just feel he's a bit more durable. If this gets into a messy fight, second, third round, he's the more durable guy. We all saw when Brandon Royval had that shoulder injury versus Brandon Moreno. So, and what you're getting with Pantoja is a well-rounded fighter, a guy that can go 3 rounds, a guy that can take you down, a guy that has good jiu-jitsu, good stand-up. I think the big thing here is going to be Pantoja's top game and the ability to get takedowns. I think he's going to be the better wrestler here. And I think he's the better boxer, but I give Royval the knees, the kicks. But Pantoja's my guy. I think he's the more well-rounded guy, the better grappler in this fight as far as the offensive wrestling goes. And I think that's going to be the factor here. Plus, Pantoja has a who's who list of guys he's fought in that division, and he's looked good against almost every single one of them. So Pantoja's my pick here. He should get this done here, use some wrestling and his well-versed game. So yeah, Pantoja.
Sounds good. Let's move on to fight number 2. In that case, we have Vinc Pichel taking on Austin Hubbard. I'm going to start with this fight as well. Vinc Pichel, it's been a year since his last fight. He beat Jim Miller. That was back in August 2020. 2-fight win streak overall in that case. A decent overall stand-up, some feints, some switch stancing, or stance switching, I should say. He'll get the calf kick in here and there. Likes to engage, likes to kind of be the tougher guy in there, if that makes sense. A bit of an underrated ground game. He showed that in the Jim Miller fight. Good top position, good submission defense, good positional improvements, good ground and pound as well. And he has heart, right? We saw that in the Roosevelt Roberts fights. Roosevelt Roberts fight has heart, definitely not going to give up. We see his record there, pretty impressive. 13 wins, 2 losses. Austin Hubbard, same amount of wins, 13 wins, but he has 5 losses on his hands. He did beat Dakota Bush back in April. Pretty diverse striker. He'll throw with both the hands and the feet. He's going to use a lot of fakes and feints. Going to include that level change in there as well. Good calf kick, I feel. Good combinations, I feel, as well. Good lateral movement. Looked pretty composed in his last fight as well. That's something that I'm noticing about him more and more. He is starting to look a little bit more composed in there, and he is able to handle early pressure from his opponents. I think with Austin Hubbard, a little bit more of a diverse striker, whereas Pichel doesn't really have the specific tools, at least in my opinion, that are needed to beat Hubbard on the feet. I think Pichel doesn't really have that pop that you need to hurt Hubbard, despite half of Pichel's wins coming via KO, TKO. Haven't really seen that out of him recently. Pichel may have the overall better wrestling and ground game, so keep that in mind. 3.83 takedowns per fight, 60% takedown accuracy. That's definitely something that you want to respect. However, Pichel, to me, he's just not an overwhelming wrestler in the way that a Marco Madsen type of person is. And I bring up Marco Madsen not because he's fighting later on, but because he was able to use that smothering style against Austin Hubbard. I don't think Pichel is really that from a wrestling attempt perspective or from an offensive wrestling perspective, to a point where I think it's possible that this fight just stays on the feet. Hubbard does have some takedown defense from what I've seen. 58% takedown defense, not amazing, but it is, somewhat respectable. And again, like I said, I think if this fight stays on the feet, Hubbard is a little bit more dynamic on the feet. I typically go with the more dynamic fighter. I don't think Pichel is going to be able to overwhelm him with a ground game. And for that reason, I'm going to go with Austin Hubbard. He's looked really composed in his last few fights. And I think this is an opportunity for him to kind of keep that going.
Yeah, I don't blame you, man. Like when I look at this fight here, I look at 2 guys. One guy, obviously the younger guy, Austin Hubbard. UFC's putting him up with one of their veterans, and Vinc Pichel, 38 years old, he hasn't shown me anything that tells me he's aging or he's slowing down. When I look at Vinc Pichel, he has 2 losses, like you mentioned, one to Gregor Gillespie, and the other one was to Rustam Khabilov. That was one of those Russian or one of those Dagestan fighters. So aside from that, he's been looking real good fighting all these good fighters, and he's only lost to really good fighters. And one thing I noticed about Vinc Pichel is when he has a wrestling advantage, he utilizes it. He was able to get 3 takedowns against Jim Miller, 3 takedowns against Roosevelt Roberts. He got 0 takedowns against Gregor Gillespie. He got 1 takedown against Joaquim Silva. He got 8 takedowns against Anthony Nokawani and 8 takedowns versus Garrett Whiteley. So in this fight, I think he's going to have the wrestling advantage. He's going to utilize a wrestling approach. Can Austin stuff his takedowns? I don't think so. I think Vinc Pichel is game. He knows how to win fights. He only loses to the best guys. I think this is a tough fight, but I still think Vinc has stuff left here. If Vinc comes out looking like he looked in the Jim Miller fight, this is an easy win. So I'm going to go Vinc Pichel. I haven't seen him fight in a while, but I think Vinc Pichel gets this done.
I'm not mad at that pick at all. I can definitely see that happening. In some regard, I'm kind of biasing it towards the youth, even though I think you mentioned a very important point. Vinc Pichel has not really shown that 38 years of age. He hasn't really slowed down in any way. So that's going to be an interesting one. Let's see how that one turns out. Let's move on to fight number 3. In that case, it was going to be Manny Martinez taking on Trevin Jones, but that fight has been called off. I believe Manny Martinez withdrew a short while ago. So we are going to move on to Chase Sherman taking on Parker Porter in the heavyweight division. I'll keep this one pretty short. Sherman, we know he lost to Andrei Arlovsky in his last fight back in April. The Parker Porter fight was actually originally scheduled for back then. So here they are, 4 months later, having their fight finally. He has competed in BKFC, Chase Sherman, Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship. He went 1-1. So that kind of tells you who he is from a having hands, from a willing to take a shot, from a willing to engage perspective that BKFC seems to be as an overall sport. Decent overall stand-up. He likes that leg kick as part of his combinations and exchanges. Combos are pretty clean and diverse. Doesn't really overswing, doesn't really waste any strikes, kind of keeps it controlled. Parker Porter, on the other hand, he actually beat Josh Parisian. That was back in November 2020. Going to keep it on the feet, of course. With these heavyweights, that's not a surprise. He's going to be the one that's coming forward. He's going to be looking for big striking opportunities, especially early in the fight. I have seen him look for the clinch and dirty boxing opportunities as well in his fights. But like I said, I'll keep it short. Sherman, to me, just a higher level fighter in general. Porter doesn't really offer me much than sort of a brawler's chance as a heavyweight. And I can actually see Chase Sherman kind of just picking him apart unless he gets clipped. You never really know, right? It is a heavyweight beware at the end of the day. But I think if we're talking skill for skill, I'm going Chase Sherman all day on this one.
Yeah, no, definitely, man. When I look at Parker Porter, he's 265 pounds, 6 foot. This guy's not in shape. He's wild. He's just looking to catch you with an overhand or some really sloppy looking striking coming from the Porter side. When I look at Chase Sherman, he's been in there with good guys. He had a good win versus Ike Villanueva. Yeah, I'm with you here. I think that when you look at both of these guys, you can't really trust these guys because these are heavyweights. One shot puts either fighter down. But Chase Sherman appears to have the more skills. And he's going to be 6'4" versus 6 foot. He's going to be able to move around the ring much better. He's fought the better guys. Is he also younger? So Sherman's 31. Yeah, he's 5 years younger as well. So yeah, Chase Sherman is definitely my pick. He should get this done.
Yeah, and outside of a heavyweight beware, Chase Sherman is a pretty comfortable pick for me. So I'll add that note in there as well. Let's move on to our 4th fight of the main card and our co-main event at that. Clay Guida taking on Mark O. Madsen. Interesting co-main. I kind of wish it was Royval versus Pantoja. I think that would make a little bit more sense. But here we are with Clay Guida versus Marco Madsen. Clay Guida, he beat Michael Johnson in his last fight. That was back in February. I mean, we sort of know the Clay Guida blueprint at this point. We know his MO. He has toughness. He has wrestling. We know he's going to be sort of aggressively looking for the takedown in any fight that he's in. We know that he's typically going to be at a disadvantage on the feet in most of his fights. Although he can brawl, although he's willing to engage. And listen, I mean, he can still land, right? And we saw that in the Michael Johnson fight. Michael Johnson, who's supposed to be a high level striker and is a high level striker, Guida had some moments on the feet. And so, definitely willing to engage, and anything can still happen on the feet in a Clay Guida fight. Marco Madsen, on the other hand, it's been over a year since his last fight. Again, like I mentioned earlier, he beat Austin Hubbard. That was back in March 2020. He improved to 10-0 as a result of that fight. A very strong wrestler. He has that Greco-Roman style. Over 3,000 wrestling matches in his lifetime. He's an Olympic silver medalist. He's also a four-time medalist in the World Wrestling Championships. I think it's 1 bronze, 3 silvers, if I'm not mistaken. I have to double check. But on the feet, he seems pretty patient. Keeps his distance. Setups takedowns pretty well. Cardio is a bit of a concern, of course. Somebody who is going to be wrestling in the way that he does, it's typically going to drain his gas tank. Whereas Guida is the type of guy who can just keep going. So that's actually going to be a very interesting factor in this fight on the side of Clay Guida. But everything else I kind of put in Marco Madsen's favor. I think he should be the better wrestler here. I think he should physically be the stronger guy here. Won't necessarily go to war on the feet. But I think his wrestling accolades, as much respect as I want to give Guida with his wrestling, I look at Marco Madsen's wrestling accolades and I just have to sort of give that a little bit more respect. And I think he gets the job done. I know Guida is always a dangerous person to bet against. Never want to bet for him either. But definitely from a channel pick perspective, I'm going with Marco Madsen. And this is a fight I probably want to pay a lot of attention to. The commentary going around with Guida. Is he considering retiring, or is he still going? Is he confident? How does he feel about this fight? That's something that I want to pay attention to, because I might consider putting money on this as well. But Marco Madsen is going to be my pick.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. Marco Madsen. You should get a lot of takedowns early on in the fight. I can see maybe in the later third round of the fight, maybe he might be a bit tired, because when it comes to stand-up, Guida might be the better striker out of these two. But I think Madsen's going to have a lot of top pressure first 2 rounds. He might even get a 10-8 round somewhere in there. And I think he's going to win a clear unanimous decision here. His wrestling's too much. I believe he won a silver medal in the Olympics. So Marco Madsen, yeah, definitely my pick here to get this to the mat and win a unanimous decision.
Okay, definitely in line on that one. So let's move on into our main event of the evening. We have Jared Cannonier taking on Kelvin Gastelum. These are 2 high-ranked middleweight fighters. How do you feel about this one?
Man, I think this is a really tough match for Kelvin Gastelum. Jared's a big middleweight, and we know that Kelvin is not the biggest middleweight, and he's a bit pudgy as far as middleweights go. He doesn't have that muscle that these other middleweights have. Jared has really good kicks, really good low kicks, strong legs. You saw what he did to Anderson Silva in that fight. This is a hard matchup here, because I see Cannonier, that power could be a problem here. And he can keep going. He gets better as the fight goes on. He looked good in the Whitaker fight as the fight went on. Oh, man, this is tough for Kelvin, but I'm going to go with Kelvin Gastelum. I'm getting the same vibes I'm getting when Kelvin Gastelum fought Uriah Hall back in 2013. Back then, Uriah Hall was this killer on The Ultimate Fighter, putting people in the hospital, and nobody gave this guy a chance. And for some reason, I see something similar here. I see Gastelum, Gastelum might be the overall better MMA fighter. He might be able to, he definitely has a better wrestling. But the thing is, Jared's a really strong guy. So it's going to be really hard to implement that heavy grappling game against Cannonier. But the thing about Cannonier, as good as he is striking, Gastelum has sneaky striking too, that Gastelum can kind of stand with him. And I'm just going to bank it on the fact that Gastelum, I believe, can stand with him a bit on the feet. I think Gastelum has underrated boxing. And I'm going to bank it on the fact that he has that wrestling to fall back on. Get a couple takedowns, steal a round. And Kelvin's gone 5 rounds. So yeah, Kelvin's my pick. I'm going to go with the underdog, Kelvin Gastelum. Let's go, man. Let's get it done.
Some further points for Kelvin Gastelum. I mean, we know that both of these guys, actually, their most recent fight, they both lost to Robert Whitaker. For Gastelum, that was back in April. For Jared Cannonier, that was 10 months ago. So late 2020 in that fight. But going back to Kelvin Gastelum for a moment, he's actually 1-4 in his last 5 fights. You see his record there now, 17-7. Crazy how that happens in MMA. But you know, you got to feel he needs a win at this point. Southpaw, to your point, good stand-up, good balance to his stand-up, good boxing, like you mentioned, decent striking defense, good speed, definitely mixing the kicks there as well. And even though he is kind of a pudgier middleweight, he is still pretty strong, right? I mean, even as a middleweight, he is still pretty strong. And a BJJ black belt. So, you know he's comfortable on the ground. He showed that in the Ian Heinisch fight. Showed good wrestling in that fight as well. To your point that you mentioned, Jared Cannonier, you already kind of mentioned the main things with him. You know, he's a switch stance fighter, good striking, good hands, sharp, patient, good intentional use of those calf kicks. To your point, we know he has that freakish power. 8 of his 13 wins are by KO, TKO. He sort of controls the center of the octagon. Only 54% takedown defense on paper. But the takedown defense actually looked really good in that Jack Hermanson fight. I know different type of wrestler than Kelvin Gastelum is, but Jack Hermanson is kind of a wrestle first type of fighter, and Cannonier showed me decent takedown defense in that one. So that's sort of telling for me. We know Jared Cannonier is physically strong. We know he competed at both heavyweight and light heavyweight. So he just has that physical strength to him naturally. When I'm looking at how I think this fight's going to go, I mean, first of all, with Jared Cannonier, he lost to Robert Whitaker because Whitaker was moving really well laterally. Also because Whitaker was actually eating those calf kicks. Like Jared Cannonier, to your point, was feeding him really good calf kicks that was very effective against guys like Anderson Silva, even effective against guys like Jack Hermanson. But versus Robert Whitaker, he was just eating them. Gastelum lost to Whitaker because Whitaker was just sort of faster, sharper. Gastelum had some striking defense issues in that fight as well. And, we also saw Whitaker be able to take him down. A part of me wants to go with Gastelum, and I think it's kind of the same feeling that you have as to why you feel Gastelum could get it done here. But I'll be honest, I haven't really been too impressed with Kelvin Gastelum lately. I think Jared Cannonier has the advantage on the feet. I don't think this fight will particularly be fought anywhere else. I think Jared Cannonier's strength and the striking and the takedown defense that he showed me in the Hermanson fight is enough for me to believe that Gastelum won't have his way with wrestling. And I think, again, although Gastelum has good striking IQ, lately his striking defense hasn't been impressive to me. And I think that's ultimately going to cost him against a guy like Jared Cannonier, who can really light you up and blast you at any point with the power that he has. I think, the same reason why you feel Gastelum is going to win, and the same reason why you feel this is sort of a bad matchup for him versus Jared Cannonier, it's kind of the same reason why I feel Jared Cannonier is going to win. Bad matchup, physically strong, probably the better stand-up, has that sort of touch of death power to him as well. I think Cannonier gets the job done in this one. So, tough matchup for Kelvin. I like Kelvin, but unfortunately, I see him going 1-5 in his last 6 fights as a result of this fight. So Jared Cannonier is going to be my pick, -160. I do wish the odds were a little bit closer on that, but I can see Cannonier getting the job done here. So let's take it to Vegas. Let's see how we feel from a betting perspective. Let's start with underdogs as usual. Which underdog or two are you considering for this main card?
I want to go with my boy, man, Kelvin Gastelum.
Kelvin Gastelum, not mad at that. Main event underdog. That would be the time to do it. Plus 125. Can't be mad at that at all. For my underdog pick of the main card, let me see here. I'm going to go with, where is he at? Cheating a little bit here because it is an even money fight, but I am going to go with Austin Hubbard, minus 110. Both guys are minus 110 in this fight. So Austin Hubbard is going to be my pick as my underdog for the main card. And then in terms of a favorite pick or two, who are you considering?
Okay. All right, when I'm looking at this main card, I think I like Marco Madsen to get that done. Vinc Pichel and Pantoja.
And there you go. So you get 3 fights, pretty healthy sized parlay, plus 376, meaning that $100 will return 476 for our bigger bettors. $250 will return $1,191. It's a pretty healthy parlay opportunity there. If I'm thinking about what favorite pick or two that I like, I do also like Marco Madsen a lot. And I know it's a heavyweight beware, but I don't see how Chase Sherman loses that fight, even with the heavyweight beware. I'm going to keep it at those two. Again, a little bit more on the conservative side of things. Plus 143, I think is pretty healthy as well. $100 will return 243, and for our bigger bettors, $250 will return 608. So let's sign off on that in our usual fashion. Please help us out by subscribing to the channel, by hitting the notification bell, by pressing the thumbs up on this video, and most importantly, by participating in the comments. Let us know how you feel about our picks. Let us know how you feel about our main event. Are you on the side of Gastelum? Are you on the side of Cannonier? Let that be known in the comments. And even if you have a specific parlay of your own that you want additional analysis on, we are more than happy to provide that for you as well. So we are going to sign off UFC Vegas 34, aka UFC Fight Night, Jared Cannonier versus Kelvin Gastelum. This has been our main card prediction video. He goes by the name of Zan. I go by the name of Harris. We are Boxing MMA Picks. And as usual, let's get this money.
Let's do it.